The night my marriage ended did not arrive with slammed doors or shouted words. It came in quietly, like a draft under a window you thought was sealed. We were sitting at the small dining table we bought when we first moved into the apartment. Two plates between us, steam rising from the pasta I made out of habit, not intention. She was scrolling her phone. The glow from the screen lit her face more than the warm light above us. I watched her thumb move, rhythmic, detached. "Did you salt the water?" she asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I said. She nodded like she was checking off a box. We ate a few more bites in a silence that had stopped being comfortable months ago. It was the kind of silence that made every clink of the fork sound like a warning. Outside, rain tapped against the living room window, soft and persistent. The city hummed in the distance, tires on wet asphalt, a siren far away, someone laughing on the street below. Inside, the only sounds were our breathing and the scraping of cutlery. "I'm going to be late again this week," she said suddenly. Her voice was casual, practiced. "Work." "Yeah, we're closing that project I told you about." I looked up. Her eyes stayed on her plate. She twirled pasta that she didn't eat. "You've been closing that project for 3 months," I said, and even I was surprised by how flat my voice sounded. She finally looked at me. Her gaze didn't have anger in it. It had something worse, distance. "Someone has to care about my career," she replied. The words stung, but they didn't shock me. We had been drifting for so long that even our arguments lacked heat. "I care," I said softly. "I just don't see you anymore." She pressed her lips together, then exhaled through her nose. Her eyes flicked to the window, to the rain, then back down. There had been signs, of course, the late nights. The sudden need for privacy with her phone, the new perfume that didn't have a name I recognized. She started laughing more at messages she never showed me. She started saying, "I'm tired," when I reached for her in bed. She started sitting on the far end of the couch, wrapped in her own blanket, her body turned slightly away. I noticed all of it, but noticing isn't the same as acting. Sometimes it's just a slower way to break. "Can we talk?" I asked. She set her fork down, carefully, deliberately. "That sounds serious," she said, forcing a small smile. "It is." She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed loosely, like she was bracing. The overhead light cast a faint shadow under her eyes. "I feel like you're somewhere else," I said. "I come home and you're here, but you're not." Her jaw tensed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't reach for my hand either. "And I don't know if I did something," I continued. "I don't know if I missed something, but I feel like I'm living with a memory of you instead of you." Her eyes grew glossy for a moment, then cleared, like she forced the emotion back. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "What isn't?" "Putting it all on me, like you're just some helpless passenger." "I didn't say I was helpless," I replied. "I'm asking you to tell me where you are, because you're not here." She let out a short, humorless laugh. Then she did something that told me more than her words that something was very wrong. She relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. Her expression softened, not with affection, but with a kind of resignation. "You really don't know, do you?" she asked. My chest tightened. The fork in my hand suddenly felt heavy. "Know what?" She looked me dead in the eye, and for a second, I saw the woman I married, the one who cried during our vows because she said she didn't think she deserved that much love. That memory hit me hard, then vanished. "I met someone," she said. The words were simple. No drama, no apology. The room did something strange then. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder. The ticking of the wall clock, which I'd never noticed, became a metronome. "How long?" I asked. "A while," she answered. Her voice didn't shake. I didn't ask for details. Some part of me had been rehearsing for this moment without knowing it, and the script was short. "So is it serious?" The question sounded pathetic as soon as it left my mouth, like I was asking about the weather. She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. Then she laughed. It wasn't cruel exactly. It was disbelieving, like she couldn't believe we were finally saying the quiet part out loud. "Yes," she said. "It's serious." Silence settled over us again, thicker now. "Okay," I said. My voice came out calm, too calm. "I want you to leave," she added. This time she didn't look away. "For him?" I asked. She hesitated just for a heartbeat. Then she nodded. "For me," she said, and then, after a beat that felt like a lifetime, "and for him." The laugh that followed was softer, almost nervous. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, one I used to find endearing. Now it just marked the distance between us. "Wow," I managed. "That's direct." "I didn't want to lie anymore," she said. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or relief. "I've been somewhere else for a long time, you noticed." The rain hit harder against the glass now, blurring the city lights outside into streaks of color. I stared at those streaks because looking at her hurt in a way I wasn't ready to name. "So that's it?" I asked. "You want me to pack a bag and just go?" She swallowed, her fingers curled around the edge of the table. I think it's better if you leave tonight, she said. He's coming over later. Something inside me dropped like an elevator suddenly losing power. My throat went dry. You invited him here, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's my place too, she said. Then softer, I can't keep living in between you and him. It's killing me. I wanted to tell her it was killing me too. I wanted to ask how long later was. I wanted to demand, scream, break something. Instead, I nodded. Okay, I said again, because sometimes the only power you have left is in how quietly you walk away. Her eyes searched my face like she was looking for the explosion that never came. When she didn't find it, she let out a slow breath and looked almost relieved. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I almost laughed at that. Instead, I stood up, the chair legs scraping against the floor, the sound cutting through the heavy air. I'll grab my things, I replied. I walked past her. She didn't reach out to stop me. She didn't say my name. In the bedroom, the air smelled faintly of her perfume and rain-soaked fabric from the shirt she'd tossed over a chair. The bed was made too neatly, like it had been for display rather than sleep. I pulled a duffel bag from the closet and began to fill it. Jeans, shirts, a couple of sweaters. My hands moved on their own, practiced, careful. From the doorway, I heard her laugh again, light, almost breaking, a laugh that didn't match the ruin in the room. Are you really this calm? She called out. I zipped the bag halfway, staring at the framed photo on her nightstand. The two of us at the beach 3 years ago, sunburned and grinning, her head on my shoulder. No, I said, but I don't know how else to be right now. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. Her eyes were shiny but dry. You're just leaving, she said, like she couldn't quite believe it either. You told me to, I replied. And you always listen, don't you? She muttered, almost fondly. There was a bitter kind of poetry in that. I picked up the photo, held it for a moment, then set it face down on the nightstand. When I turned back to her, her lips were pressed together to keep from trembling. You don't want to fight for this, she asked suddenly. The words were sharp, panicked around the edges. I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman asking me that question and the one who had just told me to go for another man. Do you? I asked back. The hallway light cast long shadows behind her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Rain pressed harder against the glass in the living room. The clock in the kitchen ticked on, counting down to something neither of us was ready for. I don't know, she whispered. And there, standing with half a packed bag and the ghost of our life around us, I realized something I couldn't unknow. I was not the one she was trying to save. I pulled the zipper of the bag closed with a slow, final sound. She flinched like it was louder than it was. Where will you go? She asked. I looked past her, toward the window glowing faintly with city light, the blur of red and white from passing cars. I'll figure it out, I said. I lifted the bag, feeling its weight and the strange lightness in my chest that came from something breaking clean. As I walked toward the front door, the apartment felt smaller, like the walls had moved in. Her voice followed me, wavering, trying to sound casual. You're taking this better than I expected. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I let the silence stretch between us, full of every word we hadn't said for months. Then, without turning around, I said, You'll feel it later. Feel what? She asked. I opened the door. Cool hallway air drifted in, smelling like dust and someone else's cooking. The echo, I said quietly. I stepped out, the door frame briefly cutting a line between the life I'd had and the one that waited outside. Behind me, in the apartment that still smelled like us, she let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Don't be dramatic, she said. I didn't answer. I just pulled the door gently until it clicked shut, leaving her on one side and me on the other. In the dim hallway, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent, I stood still for a moment, my bag in my hand, my heart beating too fast and too slow at the same time. The rain outside grew louder, like the city itself was taking a breath I couldn't. I walked toward the elevator, counting my steps. Somewhere in that apartment, she was waiting for another man to arrive. Somewhere inside me, something had gone quiet in a way that felt permanent. As the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, for the first time that night, my vision blurred, not from the flickering light, but from the weight of what I had just agreed to. I stepped in, pressed the button for the ground floor, and watched the numbers descend. When the doors opened again, the smell of wet pavement and cold air washed over me. I stepped out into the night, surrounded by strangers and streetlights, my phone heavy in my pocket, and nowhere I truly wanted to go. And for the first time since she'd said the words, the question finally broke through the numbness, sharp and uninvited. If I left so easily, had I already been gone for a long time too? The answer didn't come. Just the sound of rain, filling the spaces where my life used to be. The first night, sleep never came. Technically, there was a bed, a thin mattress in my friend Daniel's spare room, but it felt like lying on a question mark. He'd opened the door in sweatpants and confusion when I showed up at his building unannounced, duffel bag on my shoulder, rainwater dripping from my hair. Dude, he said, stepping aside instantly. Yeah, I replied. That had been enough explanation for him. Now I lay staring at the ceiling, lit faintly by the orange leak of streetlights through cheap blinds. Cars passed, breaking the darkness into slow-moving stripes. Every time a pair of headlights slid across the ceiling, I saw our dining table, her phone, her eyes when she said, "I met someone." My phone buzzed once around 1 a.m. I didn't look. If it was her, I didn't want to know what she was saying while he was there. If it wasn't, I didn't want to know that either. So I let it buzz against the nightstand until it grew quiet again. The room smelled like detergent and old books. Daniel had tried to make it comfortable, a folded blanket, a glass of water, a guest towel set neatly on the chair. The small gestures made my chest ache more than anything my wife had said. Ex-wife, my mind corrected automatically, then recoiled at the word. Not yet, not officially, just in everything that mattered. When sleep finally dragged me under, it came in fragments. Flashes of our wedding day, her dress, simple and elegant, the way her fingers trembled when she slipped the ring on my hand. Then those same fingers, now typing a message to him, her laughing at something I'd never hear. I woke with my jaw clenched, pillow damp with sweat, city sounds already in full morning rhythm. Coffee smell drifted faintly down the hallway. "You look like you got hit by a bus," Daniel said when I shuffled into the kitchen. He slid a mug toward me. "Feels accurate," I said, my voice rough. He watched me for a moment, then leaned back against the counter. "So, are you ready to talk about it, or do we pretend you just suddenly hate your own bed?" I managed a dry half-smile. "She met someone," I said. The words tasted different in daylight, more solid, less surreal. His jaw tightened. He didn't say the string of curses I could see forming in his eyes. Instead, he asked, "How long?" "A while," I answered. It was all she'd given me. It was all I could manage to repeat. We stood in silence, steam curling up from our mugs. Outside, rain had slowed to a mist, softening the outline of the buildings beyond the window. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said eventually. "No questions, no rent, nothing, just stay." The offer hit me deeper than I expected. I nodded, swallowing past the tightness in my throat. "Thanks," I said. "I don't know what I'm doing yet." "That's fine," he replied. "Not knowing is allowed. Just don't go back there tonight, okay?" I took a sip of coffee, its bitterness anchoring me. The apartment I'd left was both 10 minutes away and on another planet. All day at work, my body went through motions my mind couldn't track. Emails were answered, short meetings endured. People asked how my weekend was, and I lied with practiced ease. On my lunch break, I made the mistake of opening our shared photo album on my phone, not on purpose. Muscle memory just took me there. There she was in a dozen versions, laughing with her head thrown back at a rooftop bar. Sleepy-eyed on a Sunday morning, hair a soft mess, my t-shirt hanging off one shoulder. Holding up the keys to our apartment the day we moved in, eyes bright, hope almost blinding. I closed the app so fast my thumb hurt. The afterimage of her smile stayed burned into my vision. Later in the office bathroom, I caught my own reflection under the harsh fluorescent lights. The man staring back at me had dark circles, a jaw tense enough to crack. He looked like someone who had been left, but also like someone who had watched it happen in slow motion and done nothing. That part hurt the most, not the betrayal itself, but the realization that I had seen the distance growing and told myself it was just a phase. I'd let our marriage thin out like an old t-shirt, worn soft by neglect. That night back at Daniel's, I finally checked my messages. No missed calls from her, just one text from the night before. It was short. "Let me know when you're settled." "No, I'm sorry." "No, are you okay?" Just a practical, almost administrative concern. I typed and erased 3 responses. The one I sent in the end was the smallest version of the truth. "I'm at Daniel's, I'm fine." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Okay." I stared at that single word. If our marriage had a gravestone, that might have been the inscription. Days blurred, work, sleep that wasn't really sleep, coffee that didn't wake me up, only kept me upright. I avoided places we used to go together. The cafe on the corner where she liked the croissants, the bookstore with the creaking floors where we'd spent rainy Saturdays, the park bench where she'd once rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Promise me we'll always feel like this." Everywhere I looked, I saw ghosts of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. One evening, a week after I'd left, Daniel came home to find me sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. He flicked on the lamp and squinted at me. "Okay, this is getting serial killer adjacent," he said gently. "You need airs." "I'm fine," I muttered. "You're not," he said, "and that's fine, but you're also not staying here in the dark like a plant someone forgot to water." He grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and tossed it at me. "Come on. We're getting food." We ended up at a small ramen place 3 blocks away, the windows fogged from the steam inside. The warmth of the broth and the low murmur of other people's conversations made the world feel less sharp for a moment. Then as we stepped back out into the cool night, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. "Are you going to answer that?" Daniel asked. I hesitated, thumb hovering. "Yeah," I said finally. "I should." I pressed accept. "Hey." Her voice came through, familiar and distant all at once. "Hi." We stood on the sidewalk, Daniel giving me space by pretending to examine a nearby parking sign. Cars swooshed by on the wet street. The air smelled like rain and soy sauce. "How are you?" she asked. The question felt absurd and somehow cruel in its normalcy. "I've been better," I said. She let out a slow breath. "Yeah." "I figured." There was a pause where 100 unspoken things seemed to circle between us. "I wanted to talk," she said, "about logistics." "Of course, not about us, about logistics." "Okay," I replied. My breath formed a faint mist in front of me. "I think it's better if you come by this weekend," she continued. "Get the rest of your things. We can talk then, too." The idea of walking back into that apartment, while his presence hung in the air like a new fragrance, made my stomach twist. "Is he living there now?" I asked before I could stop myself. Silence, then not officially. I swallowed. "Will he be there when I come?" "No," she said quickly. I'll make sure he's not." The way she said it told me everything I needed to know about how enmeshed their lives already were. Scheduling my grief around his convenience. "Okay," I said. "Saturday." "Yeah, Saturday." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, the faint echo of the TV in the background, the life still moving on without me. "For what it's worth," she began, her voice softer, "I never meant for it to get this far." I almost laughed. "It didn't get anywhere on its own," I said quietly. "You walked it there." She didn't argue, didn't apologize either. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear even though the line was dead. Daniel watched me, patient. "Well," he asked. "I'm going back there on Saturday," I said. He grimaced. "You want me to come with?" I shook my head. "No, this part, I think I have to do alone." Saturday came with a thin layer of morning light, pale and hesitant, like even the sun was unsure about the day. On the ride over in the cab, my heart pounded. Each familiar street a breadcrumb trail back to a life I no longer lived. The building lobby smelled the same, cleaner and coffee from someone's travel mug. The elevator ride felt longer than it had any right to be. At her door, I hesitated, key in hand, then knocked instead. Some lines felt too final to cross without permission. After a moment, I heard footsteps, then the click of the lock. When the door swung open, she stood there in an oversized sweater I didn't recognize, hair pulled up, bare feet on the wooden floor. The apartment behind her looked both exactly the same and completely rearranged by absence. "Hey," she said, her voice was lower than I remembered. "Hey," I replied. We stood like that for a beat too long, two strangers sharing a history framed by the doorway. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside. As I crossed the threshold, the air hit me, her perfume, the faint citrus cleaning spray, the ghost of my own presence fading into the walls. I dropped my gaze, letting it skim over the living room. The throw blanket I used to wrap around both of us now folded neatly over just her side of the couch. An extra coffee mug on the counter that wasn't part of our old set. Small details, but they spoke with a clarity words rarely did. "You can grab your stuff from the bedroom," she said. I put everything I thought was yours on the bed. Her voice wavered around that last word. The bed, ours. Now just another piece of furniture in a place I no longer belonged. I walked down the hallway, each step echoing softly. In the bedroom, my things lay in careful piles, shirts, books, the watch she'd given me on our first anniversary. She'd stacked them with an attention that felt like an apology she didn't know how to say. On the dresser, though, something else caught my eye, a small framed photo that hadn't been there before. Her and a man I didn't know, at what looked like a bar, heads close together, lit by warm string lights. She was laughing in the picture, eyes crinkled, the way she used to laugh with me. He was leaning in, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. My stomach clenched. The frame was angled slightly toward her side of the bed. He already lived here in ways I never would again. I picked up one of my shirts, fingers tight around the fabric. Behind me in the hallway, her footsteps approached, soft but inescapable. "You saw it," she said quietly from the doorway. I didn't turn around. The air between my reflection in the dresser mirror and her silhouette behind me throbbed with something raw and unfinished. "Is that him?" I asked. There was a pause where she could have lied. We were well practiced in lies by omission at this point. "Yes," she said. Her answer landed in the room like a stone in still water, ripples spreading out, touching everything that remained. Time did not heal anything at first. It only stretched the pain out, thinning it into a constant hum in the background of my days. Months passed, not many, but enough that routines formed where love used to live. Wake up in Daniel's spare room, go to work, come back, pretend the silence was a choice. The divorce papers arrived in a clean white envelope one Thursday morning. My name, her name, printed neatly in black ink, reduced to a legal dissolving of something that had once felt sacred. Signing them felt like tracing the outline of a wound that had already scarred. By the time it was official, most of the bleeding had happened in all the nights before. Friends tried to help in the ways people do. It's for the best. You'll find someone who really deserves you. She'll regret this one day. They meant well, but none of them had seen her the way I had, curled up on the couch with damp hair and a book, laughing at bad movies, crying at small kindnesses. Losing her wasn't just losing a wife. It was losing a version of myself that only existed in the light of her belief. Slowly, though, life did what life always does. It insisted on being lived. Work projects needed attention. Bills needed paying. Mornings came whether I wanted them or not. I started running in the early hours when the streets were mostly empty and the city felt like it belonged to no one. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement, the burn in my lungs, the focus on simple things, breathe in, breathe out, offered a kind of temporary peace. I stopped checking her social media. At first out of discipline, then out of genuine disinterest in seeing curated fragments of a happiness I wasn't part of. Her world and mine slipped into parallel tracks that didn't touch. Until one evening, almost a year later, my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, a pocket dial, a ghost. I let it ring until the last second, thumb hovering over decline. Then, without fully deciding to, I swiped to answer. Hello. There was a pause filled with faint background noise, traffic, maybe, or a TV. Then her voice, softer than I remembered. Hey. Something in my chest tightened, familiar and unwanted. Haven't heard that voice in a while, I said. I know, she replied. I wasn't sure if I should call. You did, I said. What's going on? There was another pause, longer this time. I'm nearby, she said finally. Outside your building. I walked to the window, heart rate picking up, peered down through the glass at the street below. There she was, standing under the faint halo of a street lamp, one hand wrapped around her coat, the other holding the phone to her ear. Her hair was shorter now. She looked smaller somehow, like the city had been wearing her down too. Can we talk? She asked. I could have said no, probably should have, according to every friend's rulebook. But rules are easier to follow when they aren't written in your own history. Yeah, I said quietly. I'll be down. The stairwell smelled the same: dust, old paint, someone's cooking lingering faintly. With each step, the years between the man who'd left his apartment with a duffel bag and the one walking down now collapsed into a single tangled thread. When I pushed open the front door, cool evening air wrapped around me. She turned at the sound. For a second, we just stared at each other. All the versions of ourselves we'd been together and apart flickered in the space between us. Hi, she said. The word carried so much unsaid that it almost broke under the weight. Hi, I replied. We stood there on the sidewalk, cars passing, lights changing, the city moving indifferently around us. It felt strangely intimate, our small stillness against all that motion. You look different, she said. Her eyes traced the lines of my face, the new angles time and hurt had carved. So do you, I answered. Up close I could see tiny details I wouldn't have noticed before, the slight tension at the corners of her mouth, the faint tiredness around her eyes. How have you been? She asked. Surviving, I said. Running a lot, working. You. She let out a breath that could have been a laugh or a sigh. Same, working, not running. Silence settled again. This one felt less like absence and more like a necessary pause, a gathering. I know this is unexpected, she began. I've been thinking about you, a lot. Old instincts stirred, the part of me that had once rearranged entire days just to make her smile. I held them in place gently. What kind of thinking? I asked. Her gaze dropped to the pavement, then lifted back to mine. Regret kind, she said. The word hung there, fragile and heavy. I didn't call to ask for anything, she added quickly. I needed to say some things to you. Not to a therapist, not to a friend, to the person I actually hurt. I swallowed. The honesty of that cut deeper than any attempt at justification would have. Okay, I said. Let's walk. We started down the sidewalk, side by side but with a small gap between us, like even our footsteps remembered new boundaries. The city glowed in muted colors, storefronts closing for the night, streetlights flickering on, the occasional roar of a bus passing. Is he still in the picture? I asked, eyes forward. She shook her head. No. The single syllable carried more weight than a long explanation could have. I let it sit between us for a few steps. What happened? She laughed softly, without humor. We happened, she said, or rather, the version of me I became after I left you happened. I frowned, meaning. She took a breath, exhaled slowly. I thought leaving would fix this emptiness I felt, she said. I convinced myself you were the problem, that if I found someone who made me feel excited again, I'd magically turn back into the person I liked being. We turned a corner into a quieter street, lined with bare trees and parked cars. The air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust, but it turns out, she continued, wherever you go, there you are. I took the same loneliness with me, just into a different apartment, a different bed. There was no satisfaction in hearing that. No triumphant "I told you so" rising in my chest, just a tired understanding. Did you love him? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. I loved the way he made me feel like I'd stepped out of my own life, she said. I loved feeling wanted, chosen, exciting, but love. She shook her head slowly. Real love is what you feel when the other person is seeing the absolute worst of you and doesn't run. I had that with you. I just didn't recognize it anymore. We walked past a small park, its benches empty, swings still. I remembered us sitting in a park years ago, her hand warm in mine, her head leaning on my shoulder as she traced patterns on my palm. You didn't just not recognize it, I said quietly. You pushed it away. I know, she replied. Her voice broke on the second word. I know, I've had to sit with that every day. We stopped near a low stone wall, the rough surface cool under my palm as I rested my hand on it. She turned to face me fully now, eyes shining. I'm not here to justify what I did, she said. I can't. There isn't a version of this story where I'm the good guy. I hurt you, and I kept hurting you even while you were trying to stay calm and decent. Emotion rose in my throat, thick, unexpected. I'd spent so long stuffing it down that the sudden surge felt almost foreign. I spent months asking what I did wrong, I said. The words came out more vulnerable than I intended. What I could have done differently. Did I miss some sign? Did I not love you enough, too much, in the wrong way? Tears spilled over onto her cheeks now, cutting shiny lines down her skin. A year ago, I would have reached out automatically, thumb lifting to wipe them away. Now my hands stayed at my sides. You loved me more gently than I knew how to handle, she said. I didn't leave because you weren't enough. I left because I wasn't brave enough to look at the parts of myself that were broken. It was easier to torch everything and run into something new than to turn toward you and say, I'm drowning. The honesty hurt, but it also settled something in me that had been writhing for too long. It wasn't about my worth, my capacity. It was about her fight or lack of it with her own shadows. Why now? I asked. Why come back and say this now? She looked up at the sky as if searching for the right words there, then back at me. Because I kept waiting for time to make it easier, she said. And it didn't. The guilt just changed shape. I started seeing you in strangers, in couples on the street, in the way my friends' husbands looked at them. I wanted to call sooner, but it felt selfish, like ripping open a wound you were finally letting scar. She took a hesitant step closer, not closing the gap entirely, but narrowing it. I heard you're running a lot, she added, a small, sad smile touching her lips. Daniel told me accidentally. He bumped into me last week, said you're different now, stronger. He talks too much, I said softly. It made me proud, she said, that you didn't let what I did turn you into someone bitter. I thought about the nights I'd almost let bitterness win, the moments I'd caught myself scrolling through other people's stories of betrayal, searching for a script for my own pain. I came close, I admitted. There were days I hated you, hated him, hated myself, hated anyone who looked happy walking down the street holding hands. And now, she asked. The question trembled in the air, loaded. Now I began, then stopped, surprised by the answer forming in my chest. Now I'm tired, but not in the same way, tired of being angry, tired of carrying a story that ended a long time ago. We stood there in the soft glow of the streetlight, the hum of the city like a far-off ocean. I won't ask you to forgive me, she said. That's not fair, but if you ever find a corner in your heart where I'm not the villain, I hope you'll let me sit there quietly. Even if it's just as a lesson. Her voice broke again on the last word. Lesson, a word people like to use when they're trying to make sense of the wreckage they caused. Forgiveness isn't about letting you sit anywhere, I said slowly. It's about not wanting to burn the whole world down every time your name crosses my mind. She let out a shaky breath that might have been a fragile laugh. That sounds fair, she said. There was a question hovering now, one neither of us had dared to voice yet. It thickened the air, made our next breaths heavier. Are you, she swallowed, are you happy? The old version of me would have rushed to answer, either to reassure her or to punish her. The version standing here now took a moment. I'm getting there, I said. Some mornings feel lighter. Some nights don't hurt. I don't think about you every hour anymore. She nodded, a single tear sliding down and catching at the corner of her mouth. I don't expect another chance, she whispered. Her eyes finally said what her mouth hadn't dared to, but if there was. The rest of the sentence stayed unspoken, hanging between us in the cold night air. A door half open, waiting to see which of us would close it or walk through. The question lingered long after the words faded. If there was another chance. We didn't answer it that night. Instead, we walked in silence back toward my building, our footsteps falling into an old, unconscious rhythm that surprised us both. At the entrance, we stopped. The lobby light cast a warm pool around us, separating us from the darker street beyond. "Can I sit with you for a bit?" she asked. Her voice was tentative in a way I had rarely heard before. I hesitated, feeling the weight of what letting her in physically, emotionally might mean. Then I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "For a bit." Upstairs, Daniel was mercifully out. The apartment felt strangely neutral, neither ours nor mine and hers, just a space where two people who used to be something could sit without too much history clinging to the walls. We settled on the small couch, a cautious distance between us. She ran her fingers along the edge of a cushion, grounding herself in the texture. "You've made a life here," she said quietly, glancing around. "Yeah," I replied, "a simple one. But it's mine." She nodded, taking that in. "I'm glad," she said. For a while we just sat in shared silence. The refrigerator hummed. Traffic murmured below. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed at a TV show. "Do you remember that first apartment we had?" she asked suddenly. "The one with the broken radiator." A faint smile tugged at my mouth. How could I forget? We slept with the windows open in January because it was always too hot. "And we put that stupid fan in the window," she added, smiling through her tears now. "The one that rattled so loud, we had to turn the TV up." We traded small memories like that for a while, carefully choosing ones that didn't sting too much. Burnt pancakes, leaking ceiling. Board game nights that ended in arguments over who cheated. It felt almost like visiting a museum of our old life. We could observe it, appreciate it, but not step back into it. "You know the worst part," she said eventually, her voice turning quieter. "Sometimes I dream we're still there, in that awful, too hot little place. And when I wake up, I feel peaceful for about 3 seconds. Then I remember what I did." Her confession hung there raw. "I have dreams too," I admitted. "Except in mine, I'm in that apartment alone. I hear you in the next room, laughing with someone I can't see. I keep walking toward the sound, but the hallway never ends." She closed her eyes briefly, like the image physically pained her. "I can't ask you to hold space for my guilt," she said. "That's mine to live with. I came here tonight because I realized I'd never actually given you the choice to say anything. I made all the choices for both of us when I told you to leave. You didn't argue, you didn't fight. You just nodded and walked out." Her words brought that night back in sharp focus. The rain, the table, her laugh as she told me to go. The numbness that had wrapped around me like a cocoon. "I didn't fight because I could see I'd already lost," I said. "You were already somewhere else. Fighting for someone who doesn't want to stay is just another way to bleed." She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I know that now," she whispered. "And still, some stupid part of me resented you for not making a scene, for not proving I was worth fighting for. I used your grace against you." There was no defense left in me, no urge to debate or correct. Only a deep, slow exhaustion at the memory of how tangled we had become inside her confusion and my silence. "So here we are," I said softly, "two people in a borrowed living room, having the conversation we should have had a long time ago." She nodded, a hollow smile passing over her face. "Yeah," she said, "except back then I probably wouldn't have heard you. I was too busy running." We fell quiet again. This time the silence felt different, not empty, not hostile, just full. "Do you ever think we could?" she began, then stopped herself, shaking her head. "Sorry, I promised I wouldn't ask for anything." I studied her profile, the familiar slope of her nose, the way her eyelashes cast faint shadows under the warm lamp light. Every part of me remembered what it felt like to love her without question. But there was something else now, too. A new self, born from nights alone, from runs at dawn, from choosing not to stalk the life she built without me. A version of me who understood that going back is not the same as healing. "Here's the thing," I said slowly. "If you'd come to me before you left, if you'd said you were drowning, that you were lonely, that you needed something to change, I would have burned my whole life down to build something new with you." Her shoulders shook once, a small sob escaping before she could swallow it. "But you didn't," I continued gently. "You chose someone else to be your witness instead. You asked me to leave, and I did. And in the space where you used to be, something else grew." She turned to look at me fully now, eyes rimmed with red. "What grew?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Me," I said simply. The word surprised us both, not in its truth but in how quietly it landed. "I learned how to sit with my own company without feeling like I was waiting for someone," I went on. "I learned that my love for you was real and deep and flawed and human, but it wasn't the only thing that made me worth knowing." She listened like each word was both balm and blade. "I loved you," I said. "I probably always will, in some way. But the man who left that apartment with a duffel bag and no plan died a little on that walk to the elevator. I can't beat him again. Not even for you." For a long moment she didn't say anything. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, her hands knotted together in her lap. "I deserve that," she finally murmured. "Every bit of that." "This isn't about what you deserve," I replied. "It's about what I need now, and what I need." I trailed off, feeling the truth settle into place. Solid, heavy, unavoidable. "What I need is a life that's not built on trying to forget the worst night of my marriage," I finished. "I need mornings that don't start with wondering if I'm enough for someone who already proved they can leave when the room gets too quiet." She inhaled sharply, pain flickering across her face. "But I'm not that person anymore," she protested weakly. "I believe you," I said, "and I'm glad, I truly am, but the version of you you're becoming, she's not mine to meet as a partner. She's someone I get to wish well from a distance." The sentence landed in the room like a soft, final chord. No drama, no slammed doors, just an ending that was already true, finally spoken aloud. We sat with it, let it breathe. Let it sink into the walls and the furniture and whatever part of us was still holding on to the fantasy of some clean, cinematic reunion. Eventually, she wiped her face and nodded. "You're right," she whispered. "You're right. I knew it when I walked over here, honestly. I think I just needed to hear it from your mouth, not my conscience." She stood slowly, smoothing her coat with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said, "for not screaming at me. For not pretending this could be neat and simple. For loving me once the way you did. I didn't deserve it then, but I'm trying to deserve it now for whoever comes next." I rose too, my legs stiff from sitting in one position for so long. We walked together to the door. The distance between us had never felt both so small and so infinite. At the threshold, she turned back to me one last time. If you meet someone," she said, "I hope you let her see all of you. Not just the parts you think are safe, even the parts I hurt." I nodded, a lump thick in my throat. "I will," I said, "and I hope you choose to stay when things get quiet." A small, broken smile crossed her face. "I will," she echoed, "or at least I'll try. That's the part I'm working on." We stood there, suspended in a moment that felt like it needed some kind of gesture to seal it. A hug, a handshake, a last kiss. In the end, all we shared was a long, steady look, a mutual recognition of everything we'd been and everything we'd broken. "Goodbye," she said. "Goodbye," I replied. She stepped out into the hallway. For a second she hesitated, like she might turn back. Then she didn't. Her footsteps faded down the corridor. Then the stairwell door clicked shut behind her with a soft, final sound. I closed the door gently and leaned my forehead against it, breathing in, breathing out. The apartment was quiet, but not oppressive, just still. I walked to the window. Outside, the sky was turning the pale gray blue of early morning, the city shifting from night to day with a slow, inevitable grace. The streets were damp from an earlier drizzle, shining faintly under the streetlights. In the distance, the horizon lightened, a thin line of brightness pushing back the dark. I watched it for a long time, hands in my pockets, feeling the subtle, surprising looseness in my chest. There was no rush of triumph. No cinematic swell of music. Just an almost imperceptible easing, like someone had finally loosened a knot inside me by one small, merciful turn. For the first time since she'd laughed and told me to leave for her new man, I let myself say the words out loud, to the empty room, to the quiet light creeping in. "I forgive you," I whispered, "and I forgive me too." The room did not change. The world outside continued in its indifferent motion. But something in the way I stood, in the way I breathed, in the way I looked at the morning had shifted. I turned away from the window and moved into the kitchen, filled the kettle, set it on the stove. As the water heated, I leaned against the counter, listening to the soft build of the boil, the tiny clicks and sighs of metal expanding. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary morning. The sun edged a bit higher, sending a faint band of light across the floor, stopping just short of my bare feet. In that gentle, unfinished glow, surrounded by quiet and the smell of brewing coffee, I understood something simple and profound. Some stories do not end in reunion. Some loves are not meant to be salvaged, only honored for what they were and released for what they became. She had been my great, flawed human love. The one who taught me how deeply I could care, and how quietly I could break. The one who showed me, unintentionally, that leaving sometimes happens in stages long before the actual walk to the door. Letting her go was not an act of cruelty or revenge. It was an act of love, this time, directed at the person who had waited the longest for it, myself. The kettle whistled softly. I turned off the heat and poured the water over grounds, watching the dark swirl rise and settle. Outside, morning fully arrived, not with fanfare, just with light. I carried my mug to the window, wrapped both hands around its warmth, and stood there as the city woke up, a little more certain that I would too. There was no one waiting behind me with an apology, no arms ready to pull me back into a shared bed. Just my own steady heartbeat and the quiet promise of a day that was entirely mine. And in that unremarkable, untheatrical moment, watching the light slowly fill the empty spaces of the room, I realized that sometimes the most powerful kind of closure is not a door slamming or a dramatic kiss in the rain. It is a simple, peaceful morning where you finally understand that the person you needed to come back was never her, it was you. Simple, peaceful morning where you finally understand that the person you needed to come back was never her, it was you.